The wind off Lake Michigan always seemed to cut right through you, even inside the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago. From the 45th floor boardroom of Midwest Data Solutions MDs, the city stretched out below, a grid of concrete and glass, under a vast, indifferent sky. Inside, the air was thick with a different kind of chill, the quiet tension that precedes a high-stakes presentation. I adjusted the collar of my blazer, feeling the familiar knot of nerves and anticipation in my stomach. For the past 8 months, my life had been consumed by the Legacy Systems Division report. This division, responsible for maintaining our oldest, most profitable, but rapidly aging software platforms, was a black box of inefficiency and outdated practices. It was a cash cow, yes, but one that was clearly sick, bleeding resources and losing ground to more agile competitors. My job, as a senior strategy analyst reporting to the VP of Corporate Strategy, had been to conduct a deep dive, diagnose the problems, and propose a path forward. My report was blunt. It detailed systemic operational failures, highlighted the critical need for technological modernization, and presented a data-backed case for a complete overhaul of the division's structure and processes. It wasn't just about tweaking things. It was about radical change, a shift in mindset from maintenance to innovation. I knew it would be met with resistance. The Legacy Systems Division was run by Mark Jenkins, a VP who had been with MDs for 25 years, a man who prided himself on doing things the way they've always been done. He saw data analytics as an unnecessary complication, preferring to trust his gut feeling and long-standing relationships. The board members, a mix of long-tenured executives and a few newer, more forward-thinking external directors, were gathered around the massive mahogany table. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, sat at the head, his expression unreadable. Mark Jenkins was there too, seated further down the table, his arms crossed, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. He hadn't seen the full report yet, only the executive summary, and I knew he was bracing himself for a challenge to his authority. "All right, Sarah," Mr. Thompson said, his voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. "We're ready for your presentation on the Legacy Systems Division." I walked to the front of the room, plugged in my laptop, and took a deep breath. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My report focuses on identifying key challenges and opportunities within the Legacy Systems Division based on extensive data analysis and stakeholder interviews. I started with the data declining profit margins despite stable revenue, escalating maintenance costs, decreasing customer satisfaction scores linked to system stability and lack of new features. I presented charts and graphs, each one a clear, undeniable piece of evidence for the division's struggles. I showed how our competitors were rapidly innovating, leaving our legacy platforms in the dust. Then, I moved to the qualitative findings. I spoke about the internal resistance to adopting new tools, the siloed teams, the lack of clear ownership for critical processes. I didn't name names, but the implications were clear. Mark shifted in his seat, his smirk replaced by a tight-lipped frown. Finally, I presented my recommendations. A phased technological migration to a modern cloud-based architecture, a complete restructuring of the teams to promote cross-functional collaboration, a significant investment in retraining personnel, and a shift in focus from reactive maintenance to proactive development of new features for existing clients. It was an expensive, disruptive plan, but my analysis showed it was the only way to secure the division's future and unlock new revenue streams. I finished my presentation, clicking to the final slide which summarized the projected ROI and timeline. Silence hung in the air. The board members looked at the screen, then at their copies of the executive summary, then at me. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sarah. Very thorough." He turned to the table. "Comments? Questions?" A few board members asked clarifying questions about the data, the technology, the projected costs. I answered each one, providing the detailed analysis that underpinned my recommendations. I felt I was holding my own, defending my findings with logic and evidence. Then, Mark Jenkins spoke. "Well, Sarah," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, a theatrical sigh escaping his lips. "That was certainly a lot of charts." He paused, looking around the table, inviting the other board members to share in his amusement. A few chuckled nervously. "You've spent a lot of time digging through numbers," he continued, picking up my report from the table and holding it up as if it were a foreign object. "And you've come up with some rather dramatic conclusions. Complete overhaul? Radical change? Based on what? Spreadsheets?" He tossed the report back onto the table with a soft thud. "Let me tell you something, Sarah. Running a division like Legacy Systems isn't about algorithms and fancy diagrams. It's about experience. It's about knowing the business, knowing our clients, understanding what really works." He leaned forward, his tone becoming sharper. "This report," he scoffed, gesturing dismissively at my work, "reads like it was written by someone who's never actually worked in the trenches. Someone who doesn't understand the realities of managing a complex, established operation. You talk about inefficiency and outdated practices as if we're just sitting around doing nothing. We're running a profitable division. We have loyal clients who trust us, who trust the systems we've built over decades." He chuckled again, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Your data might look pretty on a slide, but it doesn't capture the years of relationships, the tribal knowledge, the sheer effort that goes into keeping these systems running. Frankly, your recommendations are impractical, disruptive, and show a fundamental lack of understanding of this business. It's naive, it's cute, almost, but completely unrealistic." He looked directly at me, his eyes hard. "You've spent 8 months on this? Honestly, Sarah, maybe stick to the spreadsheets. Leave the strategy to those of us who actually understand how this company works. This report is a waste of everyone's time." The silence that followed was deafening. My face burned. My hands, resting on the podium, trembled visibly. He hadn't just criticized my report. He had publicly ridiculed it, dismissed my expertise, and questioned my understanding of the business in the most condescending way possible. In front of the entire board, I wanted to respond, to defend my work, to point out the flaws in his logic and the arrogance of his dismissal. But the moment had passed. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, his expression now stern. "Mark," he said, his voice low, a warning tone underlying it. "That was out of line. While we appreciate differing perspectives, personal attacks are not appropriate in this setting." Mark shrugged, unrepentant. "Just calling it like I see it, Tom." "Her report is fundamentally flawed," Mr. Thompson sighed, running a hand over his face. "All right, we've heard the presentation and the feedback. We'll take this under advisement. Thank you, Sarah. You're excused. You're excused." The corporate equivalent of "get out." I gathered my laptop and notes, my movements stiff and deliberate. I avoided eye contact with anyone, my focus fixed on the door. The walk out of the boardroom felt like an eternity, the weight of Mark's words pressing down on me. A waste of everyone's time, naive, cute almost. I got back to my desk, the open plan office a stark contrast to the hushed exclusivity of the boardroom. Colleagues glanced at me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and awkwardness. News traveled fast in this building. They knew I had just been publicly humiliated. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the sting of Mark's mockery replaying. In my mind, the anger was a cold knot in my stomach. He thought he had shut me down, dismissed my work as irrelevant, but he hadn't. He had only reinforced my conviction that the Legacy Systems division was in desperate need of change, and that the people currently in charge were incapable of leading that change. I didn't just pack up and go home. I stayed late, long after most people had left. I pulled up the raw data again, the complex models, the interview transcripts. I didn't need to validate my findings. I knew they were sound, but I needed to channel the anger, the humiliation, into something productive. I started refining the implementation plan outlined in my report, adding more detail, anticipating potential roadblocks, building in contingencies. If my report was a roadmap, I was now detailing the engineering specifications for the vehicle. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the company shifted. Whispers about the board meeting were everywhere. More importantly, things in the legacy systems division started to unravel fast. My report had predicted a looming crisis, a critical system failure due to overloaded, outdated infrastructure. Mark, of course, had dismissed these warnings. On Tuesday, a major client reported significant downtime on one of our core legacy platforms. On Wednesday, another client in a different industry experienced similar issues. By Thursday, it was a full-blown crisis. Multiple clients were impacted. Service was disrupted, and the calls from furious customers were flooding in. The very loyal clients Mark had boasted about were now threatening to leave. The crisis exposed every single weakness I had highlighted in my report: the brittle infrastructure, the slow response times due to inefficient processes, the lack of skilled personnel trained on the archaic systems. Mark's experience and gut feeling were useless against a cascading technical failure. He was scrambling, issuing platitudes, but offering no real solutions. His years of maintaining the status quo had left the division utterly unprepared for a real challenge. While Mark was in damage control mode, trying to patch the hemorrhaging system, I was quietly updating my refined implementation plan. I cross-referenced the current failures with the specific vulnerabilities I had identified. My report wasn't just accurate, it was prescient. On Friday afternoon, as the chaos in the legacy systems division reached its peak, I received an unexpected email. It was from Mr. Thompson's executive assistant, requesting my presence in the CEO's office first thing Monday morning. No agenda was mentioned. My stomach clenched. Was I in trouble for going behind Mark's back by sharing my report with the board? Was this about the crisis? The weekend was agonizing. I reread my report, my refined plan, trying to anticipate what the meeting could be about. I practiced explaining my findings concisely, preparing to defend my methodology if needed. I also prepared myself for the possibility of disciplinary action. Monday morning, I walked into Mr. Thompson's office, the same knot of nerves in my stomach, but this time mixed with a sense of grim determination. The room was smaller, more personal than the boardroom, but no less imposing. Mr. Thompson was there, along with the chairman of the board, a formidable woman named Miss Chen, who had been one of the few board members who had asked insightful questions about my report. They invited me to sit. The atmosphere was serious, but lacked the tension of the boardroom meeting. "Sarah," Mr. Thompson began, his tone calm. "Thank you for coming in. As you know, the Legacy Systems Division has faced significant challenges this past week." Understatement of the year. "Yes, Mr. Thompson. I've been following the situation." Miss Chen leaned forward. "Your report, Sarah," she said, her voice measured, detailed the precise vulnerabilities that led to this crisis. "Your analysis of the infrastructure fragility and operational inefficiencies was remarkably accurate." Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement. "Frankly, Sarah, when you presented it last week, some of us, myself included, were hesitant about the scale of the changes you proposed." Mark's feedback, while inappropriate in its delivery, echoed some of the internal concerns about disruption and cost. He paused, looking directly at me. "But the events of the past week have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the current approach is unsustainable. The cost of inaction, the cost of maintaining the status quo, is far greater than the cost of the transformation you outlined." Miss Chen continued, "We've reviewed your full report in detail over the weekend, Sarah. Not just the executive summary. The depth of your analysis, the rigor of your methodology, and the foresight of your recommendations are undeniable. You understand the problems in that division better than anyone else in this company, and you have a clear, actionable plan to fix them." My heart was pounding. Where was this going? "Mark Jenkins' leadership of the division is no longer tenable," Mr. Thompson stated plainly. Effective immediately, he is being moved to a different role within the company, a non-executive advisory position. He took a breath. The legacy systems division needs a new leader, someone who understands the technology, who can implement the necessary changes, who isn't afraid to challenge the old ways of doing things, and who has a clear vision for the future. He looked at Miss Chen, who offered a small, encouraging smile. Then, Mr. Thompson turned back to me, his expression serious and hopeful. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm, "the board and I believe that person is you. Your report wasn't just an analysis. It was an application for the job. We would like to offer you the position of head of the Legacy Systems Division, effective immediately." I stared at them, stunned into silence. Head of the division? The division whose current VP had publicly mocked my work just 7 days ago. It felt surreal. "Mr. Thompson, Miss Chen," I finally managed to say, my voice slightly trembling. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take the job, Sarah," Miss Chen said gently. "It's a massive challenge. You'll face resistance. But you have the plan, you have the data, and you have our full support." I thought about Mark's words in the boardroom. "You'll never understand how this company works. Stick to the spreadsheets, a waste of everyone's time." I thought about the humiliation, the anger, the quiet determination that had fueled me over the past week. "I'll take it," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I believe in the plan I outlined. I know it's challenging, but I'm confident we can turn the division around." A genuine smile spread across Mr. Thompson's face. "Excellent, Sarah. We're confident too. You'll have the resources you need. Your first task will be to stabilize the current situation, of course, but then we need you to start implementing the transformation plan you detailed in your report." The one Mark called a waste of time. There was a shared moment of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the irony. Leaving the CEO's office, the Chicago wind still blew cold outside, but I barely noticed. The knot of nerves was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and determination. I walked back to my desk, not as a senior strategy analyst, but as the incoming head of the Legacy Systems Division. I saw Mark Jenkins later that day. He was clearing out his office, his face pale and drawn. He looked up as I passed, his eyes widening slightly as he registered the change in my demeanor, the quiet confidence I now carried. He said nothing. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. His mockery had been his undoing. My report, the one he had ridiculed, had become my mandate. 1 week ago, I had been publicly humiliated and dismissed. Today, I was asked to lead. The path ahead was daunting, filled with the very challenges I had detailed. But I was ready. I had the data, the plan, and the unwavering belief that I belonged exactly where I was, leading the charge for change, proving that insight, analysis, and resilience could overcome even the most entrenched resistance.